Welcome, everybody. My name is Andy Curtis. I am the operations manager here at Transfer Express, and I am happy to be joining you for this month's webinar on 8 mistakes to avoid to successfully print a t-shirt. Hopefully everyone will learn a little bit today. As always, I have some support behind the scenes here, so if you have questions as we go, feel free to type a note into that chat box that you all just typed into and ask any questions you may have. I will do my best to answer them as we go, but if I do miss one, my helpers behind the curtains here will make sure to answer for me. In addition to that, we are recording the webinar, so if you do have to leave for any reason, you will be able to see and hear the webinar on our website after the fact here. So we are recording it and we will post it. So without any further ado, let's get started with 8 mistakes to avoid to successfully print a t-shirt. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about are not exactly rocket science. A lot of these things are going to be things that you guys are going to say, oh gosh, well, you know, I know not to do that, and I've been there, done that, etc., etc. But hopefully we all learn a tip or a trick or two here, because you never know. No matter how long you've been doing this, there's always something. No matter how many years you've been pressing T-shirts, there's always mistakes to be made, and it's good to refresh every now and again, right? So let's get into it. So number one, the first mistake, and this is probably the most important one actually. So the first mistake that people make is not following the recipe. Not following the recipe. So the recipe, when you're pressing transfers, the 3 most important things, the way that any transfer applies to a shirt is through time, temperature, and pressure. Time, temperature, and pressure. So any good heat press allows you to regulate those 3 things one way or another. And every transfer, whether it's something you purchase from us or any other transfer company out there on the planet, the time, the temperature, and the pressure, those are the 3 most important things to applying that transfer. And if you don't have the time, temperature, and pressure right, you are not going to get a product that's as good as it could be. Now, that's not to say that if you make a mistake, the transfer can't be salvaged in some capacity. There are plenty of transfers out there that you can be off a little bit on your time or your temperature, and the transfer works out fine. But it still stands to reason that you need to make sure that your time, temperature, and pressure are as close as possible to what they should be. You don't want to risk running something in non-optimal circumstances and then risk transfers peeling off in the wash or coming off in the dryer. It's just not worth it. So it's one of those silly little steps that you take at the very beginning as you're getting ready to start pressing your shirts to make sure you're looking at the instructions that come with your transfers. When you order from Transfer Express, for example, we do have your packing slip that's in every single bag of transfers that you get from us. Your packing slip has the instructions right there on it, as a matter of fact. So take a quick glance at it. It'll clearly display your time, temperature, and pressure settings, and make sure they're right. We have plenty of customers that make the assumption that, oh, you know, I've bought transfers from you before, so it's just the same transfers. It doesn't work that way. There's plenty of different transfer types out there, even from the same company. Just because you've purchased one set of transfers from us doesn't mean it's always going to be the same type of transfer, having different application instructions, so you can't make any assumptions. Anytime you're getting ready, this should be the very first thing you do. You've got your shirts laid out, you've got your transfers laid out. Before you press your first shirt, double check your time, temperature, and pressure. So beyond just making sure you check it, like I was saying, don't improvise it. So consider the recipe to press your transfers. Consider that like your great-grandmother's prized cake recipe, or if you're Italian like me, it's really your great-grandmother's pasta sauce recipe. But you don't want to mess with it. If the instructions say 365 degrees for 5 seconds at 6 to 8 pressure, then you don't want to deviate from that. That's where you want to be at. There's no such thing as close enough, except in horseshoes and hand grenades, right? Almost doesn't count except in horseshoes and hand grenades. So you want to make sure that you've got your time, temperature, and pressure where they need to be. In troubleshooting, when people do give us a call, when they tell us, hey, my transfers aren't working properly, the first thing that any customer service rep will go over with any customer is, all right, so talk to me about what your time, temperature, and pressure are. We will tend to direct customers to go stand by their heat press and read off the statistics to us, tell us, okay, so what does the time setting say? What does the temperature setting say? And so forth. We don't do this because we assume that nobody reads directions, but we do this because it's one of those things that it's easy to forget. It's easy to just flip your press on, turn it on, and start going, and realize, oh gosh, I didn't mess with my settings. So when we are talking about the recipe, when we are talking about transfer types and all that, uh, make sure that you know what exactly the material is that you're applying on. So don't just assume that when you're ordering your shirts from whatever warehouse you're getting your shirts from, don't just assume you know what they are and you know how to apply on them. Double and triple check this kind of stuff. Make sure that it is cotton, that it is polyester. If you do have a customer that's asking you to apply on something unique, you don't have to be worried about that, but be aware of what it is. And when you place your order, tell the rep. At Transfer Express here, we have certainly talked to a lot of different people with a lot of strange garment types over the years. One of my personal favorites was Cocona. That was a fun one we had to do a lot of digging on. Anyone have ever heard of Cocona before? It's fabric from woven coconut shells, believe it or not. They take the time to refine coconut shells and turn it into a fabric, and you can buy 100% Cocona t-shirts. It's certainly an interesting sustainable fabric, but that was one of those that, okay, all right, we've got a customer that needs to know how to apply this, so let's do some digging, let's find out how to handle it. So the point here being that instead of just blindly ordering transfers, be aware of what your garment is, be aware of what you're applying on in terms of the fabric, and make sure to inform us when you place your order, and we'll be sure to tell you exactly what direction to go. That way, when you get your transfers, the instructions that come with them are exactly what you need to be doing. All you have to do is read them, set your press, and go. So take time to consider the material you're applying on. All right, so mistake number 2 is over-accessorizing. Over-accessorizing. So they say that the difference between humans and gorillas is our ability to accessorize, right? Um, but when it comes to heat pressing, over-accessorizing is an actual problem. Uh, 20 years ago, there were not a ton of heat press accessories out there, so this wasn't such a thing. But in today's day and age, there are a lot of different accessories that you can purchase to help you with the heat printing process. And there's a ton of different reasons why you could need these accessories, mind you. But the problem that we have is that sometimes customers don't quite understand the right time to use heat printing accessories, and you can actually mess a transfer up in that circumstance. For example, the first caption I have here: don't use a heat printing pillow with Transfer Express transfers. Never, ever, ever. If you don't absorb anything else that I say today, this is the one thing that we need you to absorb, is don't use a pillow with Transfer Express transfers. Now, I'm not saying that heat printing pillows are not useful, because they certainly are. They have their time and their place, and they have products that they are good for. But Transfer Express transfers are not it. A pillow is designed to absorb pressure. Well, it's designed to do a couple different things, but one of the things that it does is absorb pressure. So remember how on the very first slide I told you guys it was time, temperature, and pressure are the 3 ingredients for a transfer: time, temperature, and pressure. A pillow absorbs all that pressure. So you got your time and your temperature that's activating adhesive and heating up the ink so it flows, but without the pressure to force the ink to adhere to the shirt, you're not going to get proper adhesion. And here's where this slide is actually very important: is there are people who will make the mistake, they'll use a pillow, they'll press the transfer, they'll go to peel it, and hey, it looks like it's sticking, so hey, it's good. Here's the catch: is you had the time and the temperature, so it looked like the transfer did what it was supposed to do, but without that pressure forcing the transfer to stick to the shirt, as soon as you put that shirt in the washer and the dryer, you've got a pretty decent chance that transfer is coming right off. So you don't want to use a pillow. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Now, we'll talk in a minute here about what pillows are used for and what you could use instead of a pillow and all that good stuff. But the most important point of this particular slide is don't use a pillow. So here's the other part, and this is one of those rookie things that I can totally understand where people get it from. Don't cover your transfers up. Now, when you purchase a transfer from Transfer Express, it comes on its own cover sheet. So you don't actually need to cover it up. You take your transfer, your goof proof or hot split or polytrans, whichever transfer type you got, you take it out of your bag, you put it ink side down on the shirt, and boom, you're good to go. You don't actually need to cover it up any further. Okay. And again, we understand that there's lots of reusable cover sheets sold out there, and they do have a purpose because there are times where you will need to cover your transfers up. But those times are specifically when you're doing a multi-step application. For example, if you're going to print a goof-proof transfer and then peel it and then put rhinestones down around that goof-proof transfer, now you're going to need a cover sheet. And the best cover sheets to use are the reusable cover sheets that we sell here at Transfer Express, or you can use craft paper that you can purchase from our sister company Stalls. Craft with a K, K-R-A-F-T. Craft paper is, it looks just like a regular brown paper bag type paper until you feel it. It's got kind of a waxy coating to it. So when you do need to use a cover sheet, you want to use our reusable cover sheets or craft paper. And again, you only need to do that when you're covering something that has already been printed. So think of it like this. After you've pressed a transfer and peeled the paper off, that heating element, your upper platen, should not touch that ink again. If it does, that ink is going to stick to that upper platen and it's going to make a yucky mess. You do not want to do that. Been there, done that, trust me. So when you do need to cover something up because you're putting rhinestones around a transfer, or maybe you're foiling part of a transfer, or maybe you're combining two transfers, that's certainly been done before when you've got some elements from one transfer that you cut off and you want to put on another transfer. So that's another situation where you'd have to press one transfer, peel it, put your other transfer down, cover the whole thing, press it again. So when you do need to use a cover sheet, make sure you're using the right one, but it's only when you're doing those multiple steps. So you do not want to use these two types of cover sheets. Now, not that these accessories don't have their time and their place, but they're not good for a Transfer Express transfer. Okay, so a flexible application pad, it's like a gray rubbery pad. It's made out of a similar material to your lower platen. At least it feels very similar. It's just much thinner, like a piece of paper. Flexible application pads have their time and their place, but it's not here with the Transfer Express products. And then the nonstick cover sheets that you can get from Stalls, they're another one that the nonstick cover sheets are different than the craft paper now. The reusable nonstick cover sheets have a coating on them that makes them very slick and slippery. The problem with both of these types of cover sheets is that they deflect a lot of heat. Okay, so the reusable cover sheets on the right, they'll deflect a ton of heat. The flexible application pad will absorb a bunch of heat, and what will end up happening is the transfer underneath won't get the heat that you need it to get. Okay, go back to that first slide that I showed you. You need to have time, temperature, and pressure right for a transfer to apply correctly. And these types of cover sheets will deflect heat, giving you the wrong temperature. Okay. Now, again, there's people out there that'll say, but Andy, I've used a flexible application pad before and it didn't destroy anything. It didn't do anything. You got lucky. There are times when you can actually use it, and hey, it deflected only about 10 degrees of heat, and the transfer worked anyway. It's because the transfer was versatile, and you got lucky there. But there are transfers that are less versatile that do need very specific temperatures out there. And if you use the wrong kind of cover sheet for the wrong reason, you'll deflect heat away from something that desperately needs the heat, and then you've got a ruined transfer. So so again, in review here, when you do have to have a cover sheet, only when you're doing multiple step applications, when you do have a cover sheet, you want to use Transfer Express cover sheets or you want to use craft paper from Stalls. Do not use a flexible application pad or the reusable non-stick cover sheets like you see on the right-hand side there. All right, mistake number 3 is improper heat press maintenance. Improper heat press maintenance. So here's the way to look at this. If you have purchased a heat press to augment your business, then you are hinging some part of your business. Maybe it's not a huge percentage. Maybe the heat press is just a small part of what you do. Or maybe you've started a garage business and the heat press is your whole business. Regardless, when you've purchased a heat press, you're hinging some percentage of your company's success on that piece of equipment, that piece of equipment becomes a cornerstone, and you have to make sure that, number one, you've purchased the right heat press, but number two, you have to make sure that you take care of that heat press. Now, if you've purchased the right kind of press, it's not like you have to treat it with kid gloves like it's an egg that's going to break, but you still want to make sure you give it the right amount of respect and reverence. You don't want to throw it around. You don't want to let it collect dust and get all messy and yucky. You need to make sure your heat press is maintained properly. Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple different things here that you can do to make sure you're maintaining your heat press correctly. So the very first thing here is keep it clean. Now, this is particularly important on the upper platen. So if you look at the picture on the slider, you'll notice there's a gentleman who's wiping off the upper platen of his press. So just for those of you out there who might be a little bit newer, the upper platen is where the heating element's at. That's what he's wiping off in the picture there. The upper platen is the top part, and then the lower platen, where you put your shirt, is that bottom part there. So the upper platen is where the heat's at, and you want to make sure that you're not just keeping the upper platen clean, make sure you're actually gentle with it too. I've seen customers who will get a little bit of schmutz on their upper platen and take a razor blade and start scraping, and oh gosh, you don't want to do that. What you don't realize you're doing is you're scraping off that nonstick surface on that upper platen, and you really don't want to do that. So you'll notice what the gentleman in this picture is doing is he's actually just using a clean rag. Um, so oh, customize apparel and signs. My internet crashed on me. What was number one? Number one was making sure you follow the right recipe: time, temperature, and pressure. Time, temperature, and pressure. So anyway, keeping your upper platen clean, keeping your heat press clean in general. If you do get a mess on your upper platen, this does happen. We are all human. We have all done this. If I had $1 for every time in the last 15 years that I have put a transfer on upside down and stuck it to the upper platen, I don't even want to go there. One of my favorite stories is I was demoing a heat press at a trade show a good 15 years ago, and of course I'm talking to the people. I'm trying to pay attention to what I'm doing on my press, but talk to the crowd in front of me, lock my press down, press pops up, and the transfer's gone. Oh dear Lord, I've stuck it to the upper platen. So it happens to all of us. When that does happen, there's a couple ways to handle it, and honestly, the way I've always taken care of this is I always like to find a scrap T-shirt. I think every heat presser on the planet has that box of scrap T-shirts and scrap fabrics and scrap towels and all that stuff we all got laying around, right? You just grab something clean. You don't want any crud on the fabric itself, but grab something clean and wipe off your upper platen. If it's got a non-stick surface, like a Hotronix press, if it's got a non-stick surface, then that transfer will actually wipe right off pretty cleanly for the most part. Now, if it's baked on there real good, or you had a lot of color, so it was a thicker transfer, then honest to gosh, like I have on the slide here, you can use Mechanics non-abrasive hand cleaner. You can use a household iron cleaner, mild soap and water. I have always just used a damp cloth. I have used soap only once in a blue moon, but it's really not necessary. You get your cloth damp and you wipe it off. The trick here is that you turn the heat press off and let it cool down just a smidgen. You don't want a cold press because the ink is not going to cleanly wipe off that upper platen if the press is cold. So the press needs to be warm, but you don't want it turned on. You don't want it to be that hot. So you turn the press off, you give it maybe 5 minutes at the most, then you take your damp cloth and you carefully wipe that upper platen, and that ink will come right off, I promise. If you want to be super duper careful, I suggest Dawn dish detergent, just a tiny little dollop of Dawn on your clean cloth, and that will do the trick too. Just my 2 cents. But the other part of keeping your press clean is to use a pad protector like you see here in the 2 pictures. The pad protector is for the bottom platen. Now, it's one of those silly things that you go, okay, well, if the heating element's on the top, then why is it so important to keep the bottom platen clean? Number one, as a bottom platen starts to get really old, if you've got a heat press that's a Hotronix that's been around for a while and they're out there, we've got a couple Hotronixes here in our building that are good 20 years old, actually. That bottom platen can start to get a little chunky. It can start to crack and all that good stuff once it gets real old. That bottom cover is real nice because it protects it from getting that old and that chunky and cracky and all that good stuff. So on top of it, though, if you get ink on your bottom platen, if it's just a tiny little bit of ink, it's usually not a big deal. But if you have a big enough deposit of ink building up on your bottom platen, it can come off on your shirt. You don't want that. And on top of all of that, that bottom platen cover is really nice because it actually allows you to slip your shirts on when you dress your platen, to slip the shirt on real quick. So honestly, those quick slip platen protectors are fantastic for a couple of reasons. So it's a small investment, and honestly, everybody should have one for their press. So. All right, so continuing with this theme of press maintenance, we sell here at Transfer Express, what you see in the picture, these are temperature test strips. So what it is, it's really, for you science nerds out there, I think these are so cool, and I put myself in that category of science nerd. They're paper thermometers. So what happens is you get a sheet of these paper thermometers, and I know they look big in the picture here, but honest to gosh, they're only an inch or so long. They're very small. You cut them into strips, and what you'll do for a packet of $15, I'm sorry, for $15, you get a packet of the amount shown in the picture here. You cut 4 of these strips apart, so just 4 of those strips. You put 1 in each corner of your heat press, and then if you want, you could cut a 5th one out and put it smack dab in the middle of your press. So depends on how far you want to go with it. But so you cut out 5 of them, put 1 in each corner, and then 1 in the middle. Then you lock your press down for 340 degrees, give or take. Now, what'll happen is these strips, they have temperatures on them: 340, 350, 60, 370, 380, and the strip will turn black all the way up to the temperature that you have the press set for, right? So if you have your press set for 340, then all the squares up to 340 should turn black. So your press is set for 340, you lock your press down, and the 340 box doesn't turn black. That means your press is too cool. Maybe you lock it and the 350 box turns black. Well, if your press is set for 340 and 350 just turned black, and your press is too hot. So if this is just a way to get to know how hot or how cold or how on the nose your press runs. If you've got a newer press, especially a Hottronics, it should be true to temperature. These are fantastic though as your press begins to get old. It's honestly it's an investment that everybody should make. It's just responsible for you to know your press, especially if you're going to be using it on a regular basis. If your press is something that you don't have going all the time, or it's just a small part of your business, then all right, maybe you don't need to do it quite as often as quarterly per se. But if your press is a part of your business, if it's important to your customers and you're using it on a regular basis, this is one of those things that you really should invest in. It's only $15 and it's worth the time. So Brendan and Emily ask, what do you consider old? You know what? Actually, here's the funny thing about that, ladies, is that old depends on what brand of press you have. A Hottronics press, I have used 20, 25-year-old Hottronics presses that are showing their age, but they function perfectly. There are off-brand presses that old can be 2 or 3 or 4 years old, unfortunately. So it kind of comes down to what press you bought. And Jamie's asking, can these be used on all model of heat presses? Yes, absolutely they can. We happen to sell them when we talk about Hottronics, but you can certainly use these test strips on any kind of press. So, but the temperature is an important part of things. Like I said on step 1, the time, temperature, and pressure. Temperature is a big, big, big deal. You want to know that your press is running correctly. So we talked about temperature, so we should talk about pressure. So pressure is another one of those things that as a press gets old, the upper platen can warp. Or if you've ever had an accident, your press fell off your workspace or your shelf, whatever, then it is possible that your press can get dinged up, or in transportation if you take your press places. Either way, the point is that you want to make sure that your press always has even pressure. So now for giggles here, you can use dollar bills. Like you see here in the picture, you place a dollar bill on each corner of the press, and then you lock the press down. Okay, so what you're going to want to do now, I don't use dollar bills when I do this. I fully admit it. I don't tend to have dollar bills on me. I use just regular pieces of paper. And what I'll do is I'll shred one piece of printer paper into 4 pieces. And the catch is, like you see in the picture here, you see how the dollar bills are placed in such a fashion that you have part of the dollar bill hanging off of each corner. So you do the same thing. You can do it with printer paper, whatever kind of paper you have sitting around. The point here is you lock your press down, and then at a medium pressure, medium pressure, you try to pull that paper out. Now, if you're on a medium pressure, that paper shouldn't want to come out. Okay, if you've got your press at a good medium firm pressure, that paper should be pretty well stuck in there. So if you're at medium firm and you start to pull on those papers as you have the press locked down and they slide right out, you've got a pressure problem somewhere. Okay. Now, here's what I will tell you, that if the paper doesn't budge at all and tears before you can pull the paper out, you might have your pressure a little too high. The catch that you want, that at medium firm, at a good medium firm pressure, you should be able to pull that paper a little. There should be some give, not a lot. Shouldn't be easy to just yank it right out, but there should be some give. And I missed your question there, Steve. How long do you press for the temperatures check, those temperature strips? Honestly, Steve, I press for about 4 or 5 seconds. To be honest, I don't think they really even require that long, 4 or 5 seconds, but just sheer habit, since that's our goof-proof transfers, I just make a habit of pressing them for 4 or 5 seconds. But so this is how you check the pressure of your press. And this is just as important as the temperature, folks, because especially if you've got an older press, you need to make sure that all corners of the press are showing the same amount of pressure. And if they're not, that's something you need to know. If you've got an older press, maybe you bought it off of eBay or something, or maybe you've just got an old Hotronics press because they last forever, then you need to know if there's one corner that the pressure is a little bit out of whack, because then you need to avoid that corner when you have to. Pressure is one of those things. After 15 years of customer service here at Transfer Express, I can honestly say that pressure is one of the things that will mess transfers up before anything else. It's one of the things that people do get wrong most often. So make sure you know your press. Make sure you know if your press's pressure is off whack. If you've got a Hotronics press, you can always call Hotronics and they can walk you through how to fix some of those problems too, whether it's the temperature or the pressure. All right, and don't cheap out. Don't cheap out. Beyond everything else, when you're buying your heat press, don't cheap out on it. You will get what you pay for, I promise. A Hotronics heat press may not be the cheapest heat press on the market. As a matter of fact, I promise it won't be the cheapest heat press on the market, but it will be worth every dollar you spend. So the picture that I've got here at the top of the slide shows you the heating coils inside a Hotronics press. So these heating coils, you'll notice that they are perfectly spaced. They are all over the place. So no matter where that transfer would go on that upper platen, because that's where those heating coils are, no matter where that transfer would fall, there would be heating coils on top of it. There are presses out there that if you were to slice open that upper platen and look at it, the heating coils aren't arranged like you see in my picture. They're arranged in an X shape or a Z shape, and cost-cutting measures. And those are the types of presses you do not want to purchase. On top of that, the thickness of your upper platen does make a difference. If you're looking at a heat press and you're considering purchasing it, if it's got a very thin upper platen, on some level, people will think, ooh, it's lighter, it's easier to carry it around and travel with it if I want to. Well, yeah, but keep in mind that that upper platen, that's where the heat comes from, and that's where the pressure comes from. That's the most important part of your press, is that upper platen. So if you've got a thin, lightweight design upper platen, that's not necessarily heavy duty, and you need to rethink, what am I doing with this heat press? Do I need heavy duty? Is it going to be worth how much money I'm putting into it? The thickness of your upper platen is a good gauge on quality of your press. But point being here on this one, that one of the mistakes people make is they'll go hit eBay or Amazon. They'll find that heat press, and I honestly, I find it funny how easy it has become to find those $150, $200 heat presses out there in the industry these days. And by God, you can find them easily. You can go buy one, but you're going to have problems. It may not be the first time you fire it up, but it'll be pretty soon thereafter, I promise. Either the heat's not even or the pressure's not even. You'll fail that dollar bill pressure test every time. I don't do it. don't buy the $150, $200 heat presses. It's just not worth it. All right, so let's move on to mistake number 4, not raising the print area. So I started to sort of touch on this a tiny little bit when I was talking about pressure. Um, so let's look at the picture on the right-hand side, if you would here. You'll notice that it says Miners Brewery, and it's a red and gold design. So you'll notice that they've actually got a lump underneath that transfer. So that lump is a print perfect pad. That's the little items in the picture on the left-hand side there. That print perfect pad has been put up inside that shirt to raise the surface area. The reason for that is the buttons. You'll notice the buttons that are directly to the left there. So this may be a 2-button Henley, or maybe it's a polo shirt with the collar flipped up. Either way, what's happening here is you've got buttons that create an obstacle. When you press a transfer, you need the surface area to be perfectly flat, no obstacles, totally 100% flat. Okay. And this is, again, this is one of these things that people don't think about, or they forget about, or I've talked to plenty of customers that have admitted, hey, I didn't think the buttons were that big of a deal. And when you go to press that left chest transfer, like you see here in the picture, if they hadn't raised the surface area above the buttons, and again, that's the point, is we want that heat press to come down and hit the transfer flush, not the buttons. So you raise the surface area. If they hadn't done that, then the far left point of the M on Miners, the far left point, the B in Brewery, and that cityscape background there, they may have come off the paper, but they wouldn't have been fully adhered down to the shirt because the pressure's not there allowing it to do so. Ooh, Peter asked perfect question. Peter gets a gold star. What is the difference between print perfect pad and a pillow? Aren't pillows used to raise the garment? Peter, you are right. Pillows are used to raise the garment level, but remember what I said back on the pillows slide. Pillows absorb all the pressure that your press creates because pillows are soft and squishy. So what happens is if you were to have a small pillow that would work on this Miners Brewery design, you'd put the pillow up in there, you'd press the transfer, you'd lock the press down, and that pillow would absorb all the pressure. So you'd have the right time and temperature, causing the ink to flow off the paper, causing the adhesive to activate. But without the pressure, with that squishy pillow absorbing all that pressure, the transfer might not actually stick properly. So not a good thing. The print perfect pad, I know it's deceptive, Peter, but in the picture on the left-hand side there, that print perfect pad is made of, it's kind of like a silicone foam that's similar to a mouse pad, like a nice mouse pad you'd buy, not the cruddy plastic ones. And that's actually the big secret here too. If you ever have to raise your surface area and you don't have a print perfect pad, mouse pads are perfect as long as they don't have the hard plastic coating on them. But that's the point, is pillows are squishy, they absorb pressure, and you don't want to lose pressure here when you're pressing these, you just want to raise the surface. And Brian makes a good point here, pillows are also often Teflon coated. Very nice point, Brian. So what's going to happen there is that pillow is going to deflect more heat. You are absolutely correct. So as if the squishiness isn't bad enough. So so when do you use pillows? Peter asks. That's another good question. You know what, Peter? That is generally a product that we don't get involved with here at Transfer Express. Pillows have uses in sublimation. They have uses in certain films too, certain vinyl films and that kind of stuff. So there is a point to them, just not a single product you'd ever purchase from Transfer Express. But so the point here of this slide is to raise the surface area when you have an obstruction, when you have an obstacle. The most common obstacle is the one that you see in the picture here, the buttons on the Henley or the Polo. That's the most common, but there are certainly other kinds of obstructions that you can come across. A good example is bags. If anybody out there has ever pressed on a tote bag, anybody like tote bags, enjoy pressing on tote bags, do a lot of tote bags? Anyone who's done tote bags before, I'm sure you guys probably have stories about those. Tote bags have obstacles all over the place, handles and zippers and seams and all sorts of craziness. So tote bags are another one that you got to have a print perfect pad or something to put up in there, something firm. I've had customers get creative with their raising of surface areas. I've had people use a stack of cardboard. I've had people I had one gentleman tell me, I just laid tile in my bathroom. Can I use a ceramic tile? Well, I've never done that before, but I suppose stranger things have been done. Um, the whole point here is you need to use something firm up inside there. You don't want to use something squishy. So aprons are another one. Tote bags. When you're doing hoodies, if you're pressing on the muff pocket of a hoodie or near the muff pocket, I've seen people do some really creative things with pressing directly above a muff pocket, which is totally fine. But again, you need to make sure you're raising the surface area because that pocket, those seams are really thick and you're going to make a mistake with that. So raise your surface area. This is another topic. If you ever need help with this kind of thing, if you've got a garment in front of you, you're going to be doing something that's got some weird uneven pressure, uneven surface, and you need some help, do not hesitate to call our customer service reps. They can talk you through this without a second thought. Mistake number 5. This is another common mistake, not prepping correctly. In this case, we're referring to preheating your apparel. So this is what some Transfer Express application instructions look like. Step 1 says to set your heat press, and then step 2 says preheat your apparel. This is one that is so commonly skipped, and you know what? I will fully admit to having made this mistake as well. I've done this. I'm an adult. I can admit it. The point of preheating your apparel is to get the moisture out, especially when you've purchased apparel from a warehouse supplier. You have no idea how long that garment has been in that warehouse. And furthermore, if you've ever bought T-shirts during the latter part of the year, like the time of year, I don't know what it's like where you guys are at right now, but in Northeast Ohio, it is cold and rainy right now. Um, as the garments are being delivered, they're just in a box. It's not like it's weatherproof. So the shirts get to you and they've absorbed some kind of ambient moisture from the atmosphere. You need to get that moisture out of the garment. So Brian asks, if the shirt discolors, is my press too hot? So here's the catch to this, Brian. If you have a cotton t-shirt, let's say a red cotton t-shirt, red cotton will discolor temporarily. When you stick a red cotton t-shirt into your press and you preheat it, you see the steam, you see the moisture coming out of the garment that when the steam rises, you'll notice a discolored red square. Same thing can happen on a rich royal color. I've seen it happen on a really rich dark hunter green colors. When that happens, Brian, that's just the dye of your t-shirt reacting to the moisture being removed. I guarantee as you let it sit there in the ambient atmosphere, the color returns to it. Now the catch is when you have performance wear, polyester performance wear. When you've pressed polyester performance wear too hot and you've discolored that type of fabric, that does not bounce back. So you got to be careful on that. Customized Apparel and Signs asks, do you need to pre-press synthetic materials or just cotton? You know what? Here's my experience. I get paranoid with certain kinds of synthetic materials for the reason I just said. If I've got polyester performance wear, then I know, yes, I would still pre-press polyester performance wear, even just to make sure it's a flat surface, but I got to make sure I do it at a cool enough temperature. Okay. There are other types of synthetic fibers that don't really absorb a heck of a lot of moisture, though. I've seen people print on garments that have a lot of rayon, a lot of viscose in them, and those types of fabrics, it's not about removing the moisture so much as I pre-press it just to make sure the surface is flat. So it's not necessarily always about the moisture, but pre-pressing is good if for no other reason, just to make sure you've got a good surface area. We were just talking on the last slide about raising your surface area, and honestly, that pre-press step is where it's good to see and make sure you've got a flat surface. But if you're going to be using something that's sensitive, like performance wear or rayon or viscose or one of those types of synthetics, just make sure you've got your press at the proper low temperature before you go pre-pressing and ruining anything. But anyway, pre-pressing, one of the other reasons that you want to make sure you remove the moisture is if you forget to pre-press and there's still moisture trapped in that shirt. Let's say you put a big full front transfer on that t-shirt. You press it, you peel it, everything looks good, and it will. After a couple days, you have the potential for bubbles. You have the potential for bubbling. Whenever you see, it especially happens when you've got a big 11 by 11 full front solid slab of ink type design. That moisture has to escape somehow. and it's going to try to escape through your transfers. That's where bubbling happens. Peter asks, does pre-pressing and getting the garment heated make the transfer stick better? You know what, Peter? That's one of those physics things that theoretically, technically, it should really, yes. I don't know that I would necessarily put my hand on a Bible and say that unequivocally, because you can skip pre-pressing sheerly by accident, and the transfer will stick totally fine. Hence the story I was just telling about moisture escaping through the shirt. But one of the things that we will tell customers when they call us and say, hey, I'm having trouble applying my shirts, this is another one of the questions. This is probably question number 2 we're going to ask you, actually. So Jill's asking, what if you order polyester but need to press on a cotton garment? How do you know what to adjust the time, temperature, pressure to? Jill, every order you get should have instructions with it. You should always have instructions with every order that tell you how to set your time, temperature, and pressure. When you place your order, you make sure to tell the customer service reps what you're pressing on, and they will direct you to the right type of transfer. So the lesson here, folks, is make sure you pre-press everything. Pre-press it to get the moisture out and to get a flat surface. All right. All right. So everybody be honest here. Who's done this? Who has melted a polypropylene garment? So mistake number 6 is not testing for scorching. Penny says last night. Oh, Penny, I'm sorry. So unfortunately, this day and age, you don't know what's going to melt and what's not going to melt. And I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately. It's fantastic that our industry has gotten so diverse that there's so many different things out there. 20 years ago, there was not so many choices on what you could heat press on. But today's day and age, there are so many fibers and fabrics out there. Polypropylene is the one that we have featured in this picture, or this used to be polypropylene. This is an example of a fiber that is very heat sensitive. Now it's very cost effective. You can buy polypropylene tote bags that are cheap, and they're great for giveaways and all that kind of stuff. But the catch is they melt at a very low threshold. And whoever took this picture, they got lucky. Their polypropylene melted onto a piece of paper. I have melted polypropylene onto a heat press on more than one occasion. That is a big mess. So the way to get around this, the way to test to see if you have to worry about scorching, number 1, know the fabric you're pressing on. When you're getting ready to order whatever it is you're purchasing, a tote bag or a t-shirt with some weird material, know what the material is and ask the customer service rep when you place the order. Okay? Mine melted to the top of my press. Oh, Carla, I know your pain. I know your pain. But ask the customer service rep about the type of fabric when you place your order. Number 2, if you've got one of the garments readily available, whether it's a garment or whether it's a tote bag, whatever it is, if you've got one readily available, then you can actually test right on that. Just take a small corner. Make sure it's an extra piece that if it does get ruined, it's not the end of the world. But just take a corner of it, press it, and see what it does. If you're testing on a garment like that, and after you press it, if the finish of the fabric changes, meaning that if you had a shiny fabric that got dull or a dull fabric that got shiny, there's your flashing red light. Something is wrong, shouldn't happen, don't do that. You can also test on handles. You can test on whatever part of the material it is you have access to. But for me, the most fail-safe way of double checking to make sure you don't have a heat-sensitive material, something you have to worry about that's going to scorch or melt, is ask the customer service rep. Stephanie Gravens is asking, if you melt it to the top of the heat press, what's the best way to clean it off? Honest to gosh, I would do that again with my damp washcloth, and I would definitely bust out my Dawn dish detergent in that situation, Stephanie. I again would probably turn the press off and let it cool down a little bit, get my dish detergent out, and start wiping gently. Whenever you have to clean your press off like that, think of it like Mom's expensive frying pan, Mom's really nice nonstick frying pan. So you want to clean it and treat it just like that. Scott says polyester shines even at 265. Yeah, that's some of those polyesters out there are very heat sensitive. Thank goodness we've got transfers that can fight that. But anyway, if you do melt one to your upper platen, you clean it just like we talked about earlier. You got to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more painstaking, because if you melt a bag to your press, that tends to be a little bit more melting than just a transfer. So remember to keep the press warm. Don't let it cool down all the way, but be ready with a couple different towels. It's going to take more than just one. All right, mistake number 7, almost done. Mistake number 7 is not minimizing distractions. This sounds silly, I know, but honestly, anybody who's done this before can verify. I have made this mistake before myself. You're trying to multitask. You're doing too many things at the same time. You're going to screw something up. Maybe you put a transfer on sideways. Maybe you put a transfer on upside down. Maybe you melt a tote bag to your garment or to your Platen. Either way, you need to pay attention to what you're doing. You're operating a piece of equipment that is a couple hundred degrees that you could honestly hurt yourself with. I wish we had more time. I could sit here and tell you stories of customers that I know one individual who managed to singe her bangs off. Got her hair caught in her heat press and singed her bangs off. I know another person who was wearing a flowy long t-shirt. They weren't paying attention. They locked the shirt they were wearing, just a chunk of their shirt, locked it into the heat press, weren't paying attention, turned around, and yanked their heat press right off their table. And let me tell you, even a Hotronics press is not made for impact. So you got to be careful. You pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure you don't have distractions. Remember, these T-shirts. I mean, sure, it seems like you could easily multitask while you're heat pressing, but those T-shirts, man, that's what's bringing in your livelihood. That's what your customers are paying for, and they need to be treated with that kind of reverence, right? So take it from me. Make sure you pay attention to what you're doing. Don't be on your phone and trying to press at the same time. I promise it won't go well. Don't have your drink sitting right there next to your heat press, because that's another mistake waiting to happen. You don't want to dump stuff all over your heat press. That's also a bad thing. Brenda asks, when you are not using your Hotronics heat press, should the Platen be up or down? You know what? Honestly, Brenda, we have always left them in the upright position when the heat press is not being used. It will be less stress on the press itself and less use of the physical machinery, so keep it in the upright position. But so anyway, not minimizing distractions, big deal. Don't overlook this one. All right, mistake number 8, and I've got a couple slides here to give you examples. Now, again, this is going to be one of those where you can go back and watch the webinar afterwards, because we could spend a good 20 minutes on these slides alone, but it's already been 48 minutes, and I don't want to keep you guys much longer here. But mistake number 8 is not using the proper placement. This is another one of those things that can be very nerve-wracking when you're new to pressing transfers and when you're new to this industry, is where exactly do I put the transfer? How do I figure out where to put the transfer? Now, I started many years ago when the person who was instructing me gave me all the visual clues. I didn't have measurements. I never had a ruler or anything. I was taught just by visual clues. And that's what the pictures on this slide are showing you, visual cues on where to put a left chest or a full front. So for sheer example's sake, the two on the right-hand side of this slide are how to place a left chest on a regular t-shirt and how to place a left chest on a polo shirt. The trick here with these is that you use the the rightmost part of the collar, when you're looking at the shirt on your press. You go as far to the right as you can, the edge of the collar, and you come down midway to the middle point of the sleeve, give or take. You don't want to go all the way down towards the armpit of the sleeve, because then you're going to have your left chest in your armpit. You don't want to go too high up, though, otherwise you got your left chest on your shoulder. So you go down as far as the middle of the sleeve, and that's where you center your left chest transfer. Or again, we've got some great measurements here, 7.5 to 9 inches from the inseam, or from the left seam rather, and 4 inches to 6 inches down from the center. So regardless of which way you want to do it, I've got some good measurements on these slides for those of you who want to bust your ruler out. But for those of you who are more visual creatures like myself, these are some great visual representations. To this day, the way I do a full-size adult is I make a plus sign on my t-shirt. The tag on the shirt is the middle part for your vertical axis, and then from armpit to armpit is the midpoint for your horizontal axis, and then you literally, where those two intersect, boom, that's the middle of where your full-size adult goes. I'm going to go to the next slide here, which will give us a couple more, but again, if you want to come back and look at this information more, the webinar will be posted on our website, so you can review at your heart's content. And Brian McCarthy's got a question. Typical, do you thread a garment front to back or back to front? Thread a garment front to back or back to front. You know what? I apologize, Brian. I'm not following completely. I do tend to thread my garments when I press them, though. Yes, I just have to be cognizant of making sure, you know, if you're threading it and the shirt's upside down, you got to make sure your transfer is upside down too. But so a couple more placement suggestions here: sweatshirts, jerseys, long sleeve T-shirts. And actually here, I'll throw this out there to you also. The hoodie picture that you see on the far left here, if you're going to be pressing on a hoodie, make sure to be cognizant of the neck part of the hoodie, where you could have a lot of wild seams, you could have the drawstrings and all that good stuff. Remember that that is a obstacle that is not going to provide a flat surface. So when you do press on those, remember to let that kind of stuff hang off the edge of your press or raise your surface area. But hoodies, of course, are different because they got the different necklines and the neck seams and all that good stuff. So that's another one. You want to come about 3.5 inches down. I will fully admit to you that the way I do this to this day when I press a hoodie is I put 3 fingers together, my middle finger, ring finger, and pinky finger. I put those 3 fingers together and I go 3 fingers down, the height of my 3 fingers down from the collar, from the lowest part of that neck seam area. So. And then, of course, putting your transfers on the sleeve of long sleeve T-shirts. That's another popular thing. The same for T-shirts, 3 fingers. Yes, I do the same thing there too. I admit it. I have, you know what, I take that back. I have done that in the past. I have found times, though, to be honest with you folks, that going 3 fingers down on a T-shirt isn't always correct because it depends on the size of the T-shirt you're printing it on. I had to do a 5X T-shirt once, and I don't remember quite for what, but I had to print a 5X T-shirt, and I kind of discovered the hard way. I'm glad I had purchased an extra. That 3 fingers down on a 5X kind of doesn't work. And the same thing can be said for an extra small. 3 fingers down for that's not going to be real effective either. So honestly, customized signs, customized apparel and signs, that's when you want to do your plus sign. You want to go down from the tag and then armpit to armpit and find that middle point. And 2 more examples for you here: short sleeve applications and pant leg applications. Short sleeve, now here's the funny thing is if you pay enough attention to the garment that you're applying on, you can find great visual cues on where the center points are. Like for a short sleeve T-shirt, you've got that seam that's in the armpit of a short sleeve T-shirt. That seam is a great way to tell where the center is because the seam is where the center is at on the underside. So as long as you've laid your shirt down flat, you can use that to help you figure out where the center is on the shoulder. You could also use the folds of the shirt. If the shirt was folded when it comes to you, there can sometimes be just a natural crease in the sleeve that can indicate where the middle point is as well. So. All right. So proper placement can go beyond just your regular stuff. I love this slide, and we've used this slide a zillion times over years, but I like to tell people that just beyond making sure you put something in the right place, be creative about it. Remember, it's 2017, and we are the decorators. We are the people that are making the garments. Think outside the box. Put your transfer somewhere else. You know, don't just go with the standard full front. Left shoulder, bottom front, wraparounds. Wraparounds are so much fun. That's so unique, and you can do so many cool things by just turning your shirt sideways, rotating it and threading it on your bottom platen. There's so many neat things you can do. So think outside the box. um, all right. So, in conclusion, so our 8 things, our 8 mistakes to avoid. Number 1, follow the heat transfer application instructions. Follow the recipe, just like grandma's pasta sauce. You want to make it the right way. Number 2, use the right tools. Don't over accessorize. It's not necessary. Number 3, raise your print area to avoid obstructions. Number 4, pre-press, pre-press, pre-press. Get that moisture out. Number 5, melting and scorching fabrics, where make sure to know what you're pressing on and test it ahead of time or ask about it. Number 6, transfer placement, put your transfers in the right place. Number 7, eliminate distractions because it is not worth damaging yourself or your heat press because you weren't paying attention. And number 8, heat press checkup. Make sure your press is healthy and clean and ready to be used. All right, folks. So thank you for joining me today. It has been a pleasure. If you have any input for us, feel free to email us, info@transferexpress.com. Check our blog out. Our marketing team does such a phenomenal job of creating amazing content on a very regular basis. Lots of great information on our blog. Visit us at transferexpress.com. And I am conspicuously missing my slide telling us what next month's webinar is, but I happen to have a piece of paper here in my hands that tells us what the next webinar is. So on November 9th, you can join me at 2 p.m. I will be back with you again next month, and we're going to do the 9 struggles every new t-shirt business faces. This is going to be a cool one, folks. I'm actively looking forward to this. A couple things we're going to talk about is how to say no and why you could ever want to say no, how to overcome rejection, how to stay current, how to juggle your time. We're going to talk about 9 struggles that every new t-shirt business faces. So that is going to be a fun one. That will be on November 9th at 2 p.m. So please definitely join us for that. Thank you, Robbie. Best webinar I've seen in a while. My pleasure. Thank you for that. And yes, you will get emails about it. It will be on our website as well. That will be a good one. So thank you, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate all of you. And if there's any input you have for us, don't hesitate to reach out. In the meantime, I will see you same time, same place next month. Have a great rest of your day, folks. Take care.